My name is Amber Mitchell, I'm 28 years old, and last Tuesday night, my life changed forever at my family's dining table. Over a perfectly roasted prime rib in my parents' luxurious Connecticut home, between sips of $100 Cabernet, my father looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You have a choice to make, Amber. Quit your job at that liberal rag, or leave this family." I felt my journalist career and my family identity collide in that moment, a devastating crash I never saw coming. Before I tell you what happened next, where are you watching from? Hit like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments if you've ever had to choose between family and your passion. To understand why my parents delivered such a shocking ultimatum, you need to know about the Mitchell family of Westport, Connecticut. My father, Richard Mitchell, built his fortune as an investment banker on Wall Street. At 58, he still commands every room he enters, 6'2" with perfectly coiffed silver hair, custom-tailored suits, and the firm handshake of someone who believes wealth is a character virtue. He serves on 3 corporate boards and donates generously to conservative political candidates. My mother, Eleanor Mitchell, comes from old New England money. She maintains their social calendar, chairs the local country club's charity committee, and has spent the last 30 years perfecting her role as the impeccable corporate wife. With her blonde bob always freshly styled and her tennis-toned figure draped in designer clothes, she embodies the wealthy suburban aesthetic they both value. Our family home reflects their success, a colonial mansion on 2 manicured acres with a pool, tennis court, and a 3-car garage housing my father's beloved vintage Jaguar. Growing up, I never wanted for anything material, but emotional validation came with clear conditions. From kindergarten through high school, I attended Whitfield Academy, where the children of Connecticut's elite received an education befitting their station. After school, my schedule filled with piano lessons, equestrian training, and etiquette classes. My parents' expectations were clear: excel academically, behave appropriately, and uphold the Mitchell reputation. Unlike my younger brother Tyler, who embraced this prescribed path, I questioned things. When my 8th grade history teacher assigned a project on influential Americans, I chose Nellie Bly instead of a founding father. While my classmates joined debutante organizations, I started a school newspaper that investigated cafeteria food sources and administrative policies. My father called these phases but tolerated my interests as long as my grades remained perfect. My mother worried more openly about my unconventional tendencies but consoled herself that I maintained a socially acceptable appearance and didn't cause public embarrassment. When I announced my intention to study journalism in college, they surprised me with their approval, contingent on my attendance at Northwestern, my father's alma mater. What I didn't understand then was that they envisioned me working at the Wall Street Journal or perhaps a prestigious business publication, somewhere respectable that aligned with their worldview. I excelled at Northwestern, becoming editor of the student newspaper and graduating with honors. My parents attended my graduation, beaming with pride and introducing me to my father's alumni connections in media. When I declined those connections to forge my own path, the first cracks in their support appeared. After graduation, I worked at several smaller publications, building my portfolio with each position. 3 years ago, I accepted a position at the Modern Perspective, a digital news outlet known for its progressive stance and investigative reporting. The position offered less money than my parents thought suitable, but it gave me the chance to pursue stories that mattered. The tension at family gatherings grew as my byline appeared on articles examining wealth inequality, corporate malfeasance, and political corruption. My father would casually mention more suitable job openings at friends' companies. My mother would sigh about my modest apartment and wardrobe, offering to take me shopping for proper work attire. My brother Tyler, now working at our father's investment firm, watched these interactions with uncomfortable silence. Last month, I published an investigative piece on pharmaceutical price fixing that implicated several corporations where my father's associates held leadership positions. The article gained national attention, with several larger outlets picking up the story. While professionally this represented my biggest success to date, it crossed an invisible line with my family. The weekly phone calls from my mother grew shorter. My father stopped sending his usual texts about stock tips or family business. When the invitation came for our monthly family dinner, It arrived via text rather than my mother's customary embossed stationery, a subtle but meaningful shift in family protocol. I sensed trouble brewing but never imagined they would force me to choose between my career and my family. Looking back, I should have recognized the warning signs, the increasing comments about my radical viewpoints, my mother's friends suddenly becoming cold at social events, my father's growing irritation when discussing my work. The foundation for their ultimatum had been building for years, brick by brick, as I constructed a life that didn't match their blueprint. The evening of the fateful dinner, I pulled my 7-year-old Honda into the circular driveway of my parents' home, parking between my father's Mercedes and my brother's BMW. The contrast between my practical vehicle and their luxury cars seemed to symbolize our diverging paths. The sprawling colonial looked picture-perfect as always, landscape lighting illuminating manicured shrubs, warm light spilling from mullioned windows. I checked my appearance in the rearview mirror, knowing my mother would scrutinize every detail. I'd chosen a simple black dress that could pass her inspection while still feeling authentic to me. Professional but not corporate, polished but not pretentious. My mother answered the door herself rather than having their housekeeper Lucia do it, a sign this dinner held special significance. "Amber, darling," she said, air kissing near my cheeks. "You look comfortable." The slight pause conveyed volumes. The foyer gleamed with marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Family portraits lined the staircase, carefully staged images of Mitchell family perfection through the years. I noticed a new photo had been added of Tyler receiving some business award, prominently displayed at eye level. My father emerged from his study, drink already in hand. "There she is, our journalist," he said, the slight emphasis making my profession sound dubious. He gave me a one-armed hug, keeping his scotch safely level. Tyler appeared last, offering a genuine smile and warm hug. At 26, my brother had fully embraced the family legacy, business degree from Dartmouth, executive position at our father's firm, engagement to Charlotte, the daughter of another banking family. He whispered in my ear, "Missed you, sis," before pulling away. The dining room sparkled with the best Mitchell family presentation. The mahogany table gleamed under candlelight, set with the Wedgwood china reserved for special occasions. Fresh flowers from my mother's garden formed an elaborate centerpiece, and crystal wine glasses caught the light from the chandelier. Everything perfect, controlled, and arranged just so, much like my parents wanted their children. "I prepared your favorite, Amber," my mother said as we took our seats. "Beef Wellington. I remember how you loved it in high school." I hadn't eaten red meat in 4 years, a fact I'd mentioned at several previous dinners. "That's thoughtful, Mom. It looks beautiful." As Lucia served the first course, a butternut squash soup garnished with creme fraiche, my mother launched into her usual topics: country club politics, Tyler's upcoming wedding plans, and community gossip. I nodded along, asking appropriate questions about Charlotte's dress fittings and the proposed June ceremony. "You know, Amber," my mother said, stirring her soup delicately, "Charlotte's maid of honor is wearing the most gorgeous Vera Wang. I'd be happy to take you shopping for something similar. Your wardrobe could use some elevation, especially if you'll be photographed extensively." "My black dress from Nordstrom will be fine, Mom," I replied, maintaining my smile. As we discussed when Tyler asked me to be in the wedding party, my father cleared his throat. "Speaking of appearances, Amber, the Hendersons mentioned they saw your name on some article about their son's pharmaceutical company." Barbara seemed quite upset. And there it was, the real agenda surfacing before we'd even reached the main course. "That article was about illegal price collusion, Dad. We documented how several companies, including Henderson Pharmaceuticals, artificially inflated prices for critical medications. People died because they couldn't afford their prescriptions." My father sipped his wine deliberately. "The Hendersons have been family friends for 30 years. Thomas Henderson gave you a silver rattle when you were born. That doesn't change the facts of the reporting." "Facts can be interpreted many ways," my father replied. "Your perspective has become increasingly problematic." My mother jumped in. "What your father means, darling, is that your articles are making things awkward for us. Do you know I had to pretend I hadn't read your piece on gender pay inequality when having lunch with the country club board wives? 3 of their husbands were mentioned specifically. Were the facts in the article incorrect? I asked, knowing they weren't. That's not the point, my mother sighed. The point is loyalty. Tyler studied his soup with unusual intensity, avoiding eye contact. Lucia appeared to clear the first course, the timing impeccable as always. The momentary interruption created a heavy silence that lingered until she disappeared back into the kitchen. The main course arrived, perfectly prepared beef Wellington, asparagus with hollandaise, and Duchess potatoes. Everything arranged with artistic precision on the fine china. I cut a small piece of beef and moved it around my plate, my appetite diminishing with each passive-aggressive comment. The modern perspective has quite a reputation, my father continued, cutting his beef with surgical precision. Not the sort of publication serious journalists aspire to. They've won 3 national awards for investigative reporting in the last 2 years, I countered. Amber's recent article is being considered for the Burnham Prize, Tyler interjected, offering me a lifeline. That's pretty prestigious. Is that the award sponsored by that tech billionaire who wants to tax everyone at 90%? My father scoffed. Impressive indeed. My mother dabbed her lips with her napkin. I just don't understand why you can't use your talents at a more respected outlet. The Mitchells have connections at every major publication. One call from your father could. I don't want connections, Mom. I want to earn my position through my work. And such work it is, my father muttered. Attacking job creators and entrepreneurs who built this country. I report on corruption and abuse of power, I said, feeling my cheeks flush. That shouldn't be a partisan issue. Everything is partisan now, thanks to outlets like yours, he snapped, his controlled facade cracking slightly. Do you know what it's like having partners ask if my daughter is the same Amber Mitchell writing hit pieces on their companies? My mother placed her hand on his arm. Richard, your blood pressure. He took a deep breath, composing himself as Lucia cleared our plates. The dessert course, creme brulee with fresh berries, arrived in elegant ramekins. No one touched them. Amber, my father said finally, his voice unnervingly calm. Your mother and I have given this considerable thought. We've supported your journalistic endeavors despite our reservations. We've tolerated your political positions despite the embarrassment they've caused this family. My stomach tightened. The rehearsed quality of his speech suggested this wasn't a spontaneous reaction. But your recent article crossed a line. The Hendersons, the Whitmores, the Prestons, these aren't just business associates. They're our community. Our circle. They're price-gouging pharmaceutical executives, I corrected. The evidence was irrefutable. Evidence you obtained by deliberately infiltrating their social circles through family connections, my mother added, her voice tight with disapproval. That wasn't true, I'd worked with documented whistleblowers and public records, but the accusation revealed how they viewed my profession, as a betrayal of class solidarity. My father set down his spoon with a definitive clink against the china. We can no longer reconcile your choices with this family's values and reputation. So we're giving you a choice, Amber. Quit your position at the Modern Perspective and accept a more suitable role at a publication we can all be proud of. I have several options lined up, or... He paused, and for a moment I saw uncertainty flicker across his face, quickly replaced by resolution. Or you will no longer be welcome in this family. Financially, socially, completely. It's time to decide where your loyalties lie. The room went silent. Even the distant kitchen sounds seemed to stop. Tyler stared at his untouched dessert, his knuckles white around his spoon. My mother's face held the serene certainty of someone who believed tough love was necessary, who couldn't imagine I would choose anything over family approval. My father's expression was harder, prepared for either outcome but clearly expecting compliance. In that crystallized moment, generations of Mitchell family expectation pressed down upon me with suffocating weight. May I be excused? I managed to ask, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. My mother nodded, her perfect composure never faltering. Take all the time you need, darling. This is an important decision. I rose from the table, legs unsteady, and walked with deliberate calm through the dining room, past the kitchen where Lucia pretended not to have heard everything, and up the curved staircase to my childhood bedroom. The room remained frozen in time, a museum exhibit of Amber Mitchell, teenage honor student. Debate trophies lined the bookshelf alongside worn copies of Jane Austen and Virginia Woolf. Framed photos captured carefully curated moments, family ski trips to Aspen, sailing off Martha's Vineyard, my high school graduation with parents beaming on either side. The pristine white bedspread with its decorative pillows looked untouched, though I knew my mother had the housekeeper change the linens weekly despite no one sleeping here for years. I sank onto the window seat where I'd spent countless adolescent hours reading and dreaming of a life beyond Connecticut's gilded constraints. Outside, the garden lights illuminated my mother's prize roses, their beauty cultivated through rigorous pruning of anything that grew in undesired directions. The weight of what had just happened pressed against my chest. I'd always known my parents disapproved of my career choices, but I'd never imagined they would force such a devastating ultimatum. Quit my dream job or lose my family forever. My hands trembled as I pulled out my phone and called Megan, my best friend since college and the person who understood my complicated family dynamic better than anyone. "They did what?" she exclaimed after I explained the situation. "That's emotional blackmail, Amber. It's toxic and controlling." "It's also effective," I admitted, my voice breaking. "Do you know what walking away from the Mitchell family means? It's not just missing Christmas dinner. It's complete excommunication. My trust fund, my place in their will, my relationship with extended family, all gone." "And what about your soul? Your integrity? The career you've worked so hard to build?" Megan countered. "That article you wrote is making real change. 3 states have launched investigations because of your reporting." "I know," I whispered, looking at a family photo on my nightstand, all of us smiling on a beach in Cape Cod, my father's arm around my shoulders. "But they're my family." "Families are supposed to love you unconditionally," Megan said gently. "Not just when you follow their approved script." After hanging up, I opened my laptop and looked at the article that had apparently broken the Mitchell family values: price of life, how pharmaceutical giants conspire to keep essential medications unaffordable. 6 months of investigation, dozens of sources, thousands of documents, work I was genuinely proud of. Work that mattered. I clicked through to the comments section, something journalists are warned against doing. Among the typical internet vitriol were messages that pierced my doubt. "Thank you for this reporting. My daughter's medication went from $80 to $700 a month. Your article explains why. I lost my husband because he started rationing his heart medication when the price tripled. Maybe this investigation will prevent another family from experiencing this pain." I closed my laptop and moved to the bookshelf, pulling down my high school yearbook. Inside was a note from Mr. Kaplan, my journalism teacher. "Amber, your voice is your power. Never let anyone silence it, especially when you're speaking for those who can't speak for themselves." The irony wasn't lost on me. My expensive education at elite institutions had given me the very tools and values my parents now found threatening when applied to their social circle. I walked to my closet and slid open the door, revealing another timeline of my life. Designer dresses my mother had selected for various functions hung alongside the debate team blazer where I'd sewn feminist patches on the inside lining where no one could see them. At the back, nearly hidden, was the worn North Face backpack I'd carried through 4 years of college, my first real purchase with money I'd earned myself from a campus job. The financial reality of what I was facing began to sink in. My apartment in the city wasn't cheap, even though it was modest by Mitchell standards. My student loans from Northwestern's graduate journalism program had been manageable because of family support. My health insurance came through a family plan. My car, while not luxurious, had been paid for with graduation money from grandparents. True independence would mean true financial struggle, something I'd been insulated from despite considering myself self-sufficient. I scrolled through my phone contacts, stopping at Dad's cell. How many times had that number been my safety net? Car trouble at midnight? Dad would handle it. Unexpected tax bill? Dad would transfer the funds. Sketchy neighborhood when apartment hunting? Dad would make calls to find safer options. My thumb hovered over the call button, imagining the conversation that could make this all go away. I could apologize, agree to his terms, accept one of his appropriate job opportunities. The path of least resistance beckoned with its promise of comfort and family approval. But at what cost? I put the phone down and instead opened my email, scrolling to a message from Samuel Chen, my editor at the Modern Perspective. Amber, the Henderson piece is making waves. Board meeting today about potential legal threats, but we're standing firm. Your reporting is airtight. This is why we do this work. Proud to have you on our team. I thought about the next investigation already taking shape on my laptop. About the sources who had trusted me with their stories. About readers counting on journalists to speak truth to power rather than protecting it. Looking at my reflection in the vanity mirror, the same mirror where I'd practiced debate speeches and college interviews, I saw myself clearly for perhaps the first time. Not as Amber Mitchell of the Connecticut Mitchells, but as Amber the journalist. Amber with her own values and voice. Whatever I decided, I needed to face my parents directly, not hide in my childhood bedroom like a teenager in trouble. I stood up, straightened my dress, and took a deep breath. The next few minutes would determine the course of my life. I knew what I had to do. When I returned to the dining room, my family sat in the exact same positions, as if frozen in a tableau vivant while waiting for my decision. My mother nervously adjusted her pearl necklace, while my father checked his watch. Only Tyler looked up as I entered, his expression a mixture of concern and resignation. I took my seat, noticing my untouched crème brûlée had been removed. A cup of coffee now sat in its place, steam rising in delicate curls. Always proper, even in moments of family crisis. Before I give you my answer, I said, my voice steadier than I expected, I'd like to understand exactly what you're asking of me. My father set down his coffee cup. I believe I was quite clear, Amber. We want you to leave that so-called news outlet and accept a position more befitting your background and this family's standing. At a publication that won't investigate your friends' companies, you mean? At a publication with journalistic standards, he countered. Not a clickbait factory masquerading as news. I took a deep breath. Dad, the Modern Perspective has won more journalism awards in the past 3 years than the Wall Street Journal. Every fact in my reporting is verified by multiple sources and reviewed by our legal team. What exactly do you find lacking in those standards? Don't be deliberately obtuse, he said, his patience visibly thinning. You know exactly what the issue is. I'd like you to say it explicitly. My mother intervened. Darling, your father and I simply think you could do better. The people you work with, the subjects you choose to focus on, it's all so negative. So divisive. Investigating corruption is divisive? The way you do it is, my father said. Painting successful businesspeople as villains, portraying America as some kind of dystopian nightmare. People are dying because they can't afford medication that costs pennies to produce, I interrupted. That's the reality I'm reporting. He waved his hand dismissively. There are market forces at work that you clearly don't understand. If you'd taken my advice and gotten an MBA instead of that second journalism degree. This isn't about my education, I cut in. This is about the fact that I'm not producing the kind of journalism you find politically comfortable. A tense silence fell over the table. My mother sipped her coffee, her hand trembling slightly against the fine china. Tyler examined his cuticles with sudden fascination. Since we're being direct, my father finally said, let me be perfectly clear. Your work is embarrassing this family. Do you know I had to resign from the hospital board last week because your article implicated pharmaceutical companies that donate millions to their research programs? This was news to me. Dad, The Prestons uninvited us from their annual gala. The Whitfields crossed to the other side of the club dining room rather than speak to your mother. 30 years of community standing damaged because my daughter decided to become a crusading social justice warrior. My mother dabbed at her eyes with her napkin. I told the Henderson wives you were going through a phase. That perhaps you were dating someone, politically radical, who was influencing you. I couldn't bear to admit you actually believe the things you write. The depth of their embarrassment, not about corruption or price fixing, but about my exposure of it, left me momentarily speechless. Tyler finally spoke. Maybe there's a compromise. Amber, couldn't you just cover different topics? Business news or lifestyle pieces? I turned to my brother. Would you compromise on your ethical standards to make Mom and Dad happy? He looked down, answer enough. Did you know, I said, turning back to my parents, that Dad tried to get me fired? My mother's eyes widened. Richard, you didn't. I made a call, my father admitted without shame. Samuel Chen should have shown more respect for the concerns I raised. Instead, he had the audacity to lecture me about journalistic integrity and editorial independence. You tried to get me fired, I repeated, the betrayal cutting deep. My own father. I tried to save you from yourself, he corrected. I was looking out for your long-term interests, as I always have. By threatening my editor? By undermining my career? A career writing hit pieces on job creators is hardly something to protect, he scoffed. My mother reached for my hand across the table. Amber, please try to understand our position. When people ask what you do, I can't even be honest anymore. I've been telling everyone you work in corporate communications. That revelation stung like a slap. You're ashamed of me. Of your choices, she clarified. Never of you. That's a meaningless distinction, Mom. Look, my father interjected, this family has maintained its position through careful cultivation of relationships and reputation. Every generation of Mitchells has understood this responsibility. Except, apparently, you. I looked at Tyler. Do you agree with them? Put on the spot, he shifted uncomfortably. I think there must be some middle ground here. Maybe you could write under a pseudonym? Or transfer to a different section at your publication? That's not a middle ground, Tyler. That's just a more palatable form of capitulation. I turned back to my parents. Would you have made the same ultimatum if I were a son instead of a daughter? Don't make this about gender, my father warned. Answer the question. Absolutely, he insisted, though something flickered in his eyes. This is about family loyalty, not gender. What about your loyalty to me? I asked. To supporting my career and my independence? We have supported you, my mother said. Financially, emotionally. Conditionally, I corrected. You've supported me as long as I stayed within boundaries you defined. My father's patience snapped. Enough philosophical debate. This isn't one of your college seminars. This is real life, with real consequences. He leaned forward, hands flat on the table. I've spent the past week making calls. The Atlantic has an associate editor position opening next month. The New York Times business desk would consider you with my recommendation. Even the Journal would take a meeting. The realization dawned on me. You arranged all this before even speaking to me? You were so certain I'd choose family over principle? I was certain you'd make the rational choice, he replied. These are prestigious publications, Amber. Real journalism. Real journalism that won't investigate your friends, I said quietly. Publications with balanced perspective and institutional credibility, he countered. Not activist blogs with an agenda. And if I refuse these generous offers? His expression hardened. Then we're at an impasse. Your trust fund reverts to the family foundation. Family events, holidays, celebrations, Tyler's wedding, will be uncomfortable if you attend at all. Your mother's health isn't strong enough for ongoing social humiliation. Mom touched her heart dramatically, right on cue. In essence, he continued, you'll need to stand on your own, financially, socially, completely. Make your choice. The manipulative nature of it all suddenly became crystal clear. This wasn't about journalistic standards or family reputation, not entirely. This was about control. About ensuring the Mitchell name remained attached only to approved ventures and perspectives. I looked around the dining room at the oil paintings of Mitchell ancestors, the silver candelabra that had graced this table for generations, the subtle symbols of power and tradition that had shaped my upbringing. I thought about the security and privilege that came with accepting my designated role in this family legacy. Then I thought about the alternative, the integrity of pursuing truth wherever it led, the authentic relationships untainted by wealth and status, the woman I was becoming outside the Mitchell shadow. If that's truly the choice, I said finally, my voice steady and clear, then I choose my integrity. I choose my work. I choose myself. My mother gasped softly. My father's face hardened into granite. Only Tyler looked unsurprised, a flicker of what might have been respect in his eyes. You're making a terrible mistake, my father said, his voice cold. One you'll regret when reality sets in. I stood up from the table. No, Dad. For the first time in my life, I'm making a choice entirely my own. That's not something I'll ever regret. Without waiting for their response, I walked out of the dining room, through the front door, and into the night, leaving behind the weight of family expectation and stepping into the uncertain freedom of a life authentically my own. The drive from my parents' Westport estate to Manhattan should have taken just over an hour. That night, it took nearly 3 as I pulled over twice, once to cry until my ribs ached, and once to sit in numb silence at a rest stop, watching headlights streak by on the highway. By the time I reached Megan's apartment in Brooklyn, it was after midnight. She opened the door in flannel pajamas, took one look at my face, and pulled me into a fierce hug. You chose you, she said. It wasn't a question. I chose me, I confirmed, my voice hoarse from crying. Her living room couch had already been made up with sheets and pillows. A bottle of wine stood open on the coffee table beside 2 glasses. Megan had known what my decision would be before I did. My parents acted like I'd died at the table, I said, sinking onto the couch. My mother literally clutched her pearls. Clutched her actual pearls? Megan poured wine into both glasses. That's impressively on brand. The absurdity of it made me laugh through fresh tears. Tyler looked like he wanted to say something meaningful, but he just sat there. Tyler has his own golden handcuffs, Megan observed. He's seeing your cage door swing open while his lock's tighter. We talked until nearly 3 in the morning, picking apart the confrontation, analyzing my parents' tactics, and strategizing my next steps. The wine gradually loosened the knot of tension in my chest, and Megan's unwavering support reminded me I wasn't entirely alone. When I finally lay down to sleep, my phone showed 8 missed calls, 3 from my mother, 2 from my father, and 3 from Tyler. A text from Mom read, "Please call us when you're thinking clearly again. We can work through this." Dad's message was more direct, "You're making an emotional decision you'll regret. The Times offer expires Friday." Tyler simply wrote, "I'm sorry. Call me when you can." I turned off my phone and fell into an exhausted sleep. Morning arrived with brutal clarity. Sunlight streamed through Megan's blinds as the reality of my new situation settled in. I had severed, or at least severely damaged, my relationship with my family. The safety net I'd relied on my entire life, often without conscious acknowledgement, was gone. My first instinct was to check my bank accounts. The joint savings account my parents had established when I was born, the one that had helped with rent deposits, emergency car repairs, and occasional shopping splurges, showed a zero balance. The funds had been transferred out at 7:02 a.m. My father was nothing if not efficient. My personal checking account, thankfully, remained untouched. The balance would cover about 2 months of expenses if I was careful. My credit cards still worked. I'd established those in my own name during college, but the reality of supporting myself entirely on a journalist's salary in New York City loomed large. "You can stay here as long as you need," Megan offered, setting a cup of coffee in front of me. "Rent-free." "I can't do that," I protested. I need to figure this out on my own. Accepting help from friends isn't the same as depending on family money, she pointed out. One comes with strings, the other with friendship. Big difference. I showered, borrowed a blazer from Megan that almost matched my dress from the previous night, and headed to the office. Maintaining professional composure felt crucial, as if proving I could handle this new reality started with not falling apart at work. The modern perspective operated from an open-concept floor in a converted factory building in Midtown. Despite the publication's digital success, the office maintained a scrappy startup vibe, exposed brick walls, mismatched furniture, and a constantly evolving snack table where staff brought in homemade treats and international snacks. I settled at my desk, opened my laptop, and tried to focus on following up with sources for my current investigation. The words blurred on the screen as my mind kept returning to the dining room tableau: my father's cold ultimatum, my mother's performative distress, Tyler's conflicted silence. Jessica Chan, our politics editor and sister of my boss Samuel, dropped into the chair beside my desk around 11. "You look like you've been through a war," she observed, sliding a paper bag toward me. "Stress bagel. Works better than therapy and costs less." I managed a weak smile. "Thanks, but I'm fine." "Yeah, that's convincing." She leaned closer. "Listen, when you're ready to talk about whatever's going on, I've got a bottle of emergency bourbon in my filing cabinet." Before I could respond, Samuel appeared by my desk, his expression unusually serious. "Amber, got a minute?" He nodded toward the small conference room that served as his office when privacy was needed. My stomach dropped. Had my father called again? Made threats against the publication? I followed Samuel into the glass-walled room, uncomfortably aware of curious glances from colleagues. "Is everything okay?" I asked as he closed the door. "That depends." He sat on the edge of the table rather than behind it, his typical approach for conversations he wanted to keep collegial rather than hierarchical. "Your father called me again this morning." I closed my eyes briefly. "Samuel, I'm so sorry." He held up a hand. "Don't apologize for him. Ever." His expression softened. "He informed me you'd be submitting your resignation today due to family obligations." When I said we hadn't received any such notification, he suggested I check my email hourly and mentioned something about legal representation. "I'm not resigning," I said firmly. "In fact, quite the opposite. I chose my job over my family last night." Samuel's eyebrows shot up. "That sounds like a story I need to hear." Over the next 20 minutes, I explained the ultimatum, the confrontation, and my decision. Unlike my conversation with Megan, this version focused on the professional implications. The attempted interference with editorial independence, the pressure tactics, the potential fallout for the publication. Samuel listened without interruption, occasionally making notes. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "Well," he finally said, "I've had angry calls from subjects of investigations before, but this is the first time I've had a father try to dictate his daughter's career path through threats." "I understand if this creates complications for the publication," I said. "If you think it's best for me to step back from certain stories." "Stop right there." Samuel's voice was firm. "The day I let wealthy individuals dictate our coverage is the day I should shut this place down. Your work stands on its merits, Amber. The Henderson piece was meticulously reported and has already prompted 2 congressional inquiries." Relief washed through me. At least my professional life remained intact. "That said," he continued, "I should tell you I experienced something similar." "Your family tried to control your career?" He nodded. "My parents emigrated from Taiwan with very specific ideas about success. Doctor, lawyer, engineer, the classic immigrant parent-approved professions. When I chose journalism, my father didn't speak to me for 2 years. I hadn't known this about him." "What happened?" "Time passed. I established myself. Eventually, my father called when I won my first major award." Samuel smiled at the memory. He said, maybe newspaper not so bad career after all. It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was a start. My father's not likely to be impressed by journalism awards, I said. Perhaps not. But people often surprise us when given enough time. He straightened up. In the meantime, you have work to do. That pharmaceutical piece is just the beginning. Take the rest of the day if you need it, but I expect you firing on all cylinders tomorrow. The country needs journalists willing to speak truth regardless of personal cost. As I left Samuel's office, the weight of my decision still pressed heavily, but alongside it grew a sense of purpose. I'd chosen this path not just because I loved journalism but because I believed in its essential role in a functioning society. Now I would have to live that belief fully, without the safety net of family privilege. I returned to my desk to find an email from Tyler with the subject line, "I should have said more." The message was brief: "I admire what you did last night. Dad has arranged to have your remaining things packed and sent to your apartment. I've added some photos he would have discarded. Call me when you're ready." That afternoon, I called my landlord to explain I needed to break my lease on my current apartment, a spacious one-bedroom in a doorman building my parents had insisted upon for safety reasons and helped subsidize. I would need to find something within my actual budget, not my parents' supplemented budget. By evening, the emotional and practical exhaustion caught up with me. Scrolling through apartment listings with prices that made my stomach clench, I felt the full impact of my decision. Independence came with exhilarating freedom and terrifying responsibility in equal measure. When my phone rang with Mom's cell on the screen, my heart leaped. Perhaps they'd reconsidered? Perhaps there was room for compromise? "Hello?" I answered, hating the hopeful note in my voice. "Amber, darling." My mother's voice carried its usual composed tone, though I could detect strain underneath. "I'm calling about your health insurance. Your father wants to remove you from our family plan immediately, but I've convinced him to wait until the end of the month so you can make other arrangements." The calculated cruelty of it, reaching out not with reconciliation but with another reminder of what I was losing, felt like a fresh wound. "Thank you for the courtesy," I replied, matching her formal tone. "Is that all?" A pause. "Amber, this situation is completely unnecessary. Your father has arranged excellent opportunities. I have to go, Mom. I'll handle the insurance transition." I hung up before she could respond, before I could waver. The path forward would be harder than I'd imagined, but it was mine. For perhaps the first time in my life, truly mine. 3 months after walking out of my parents' dining room, I stood in the middle of my new apartment, a third-floor walk-up in Astoria, Queens, with creaky floors and a temperamental radiator that clanged like a percussion section at 3 a.m. At half the size and 2/3 the rent of my previous place, it represented both my new financial reality and my independence. The moving process had been a crash course in adulting without a safety net. I'd sold furniture that wouldn't fit, learned to negotiate with utility companies, and discovered the complex calculus of security deposits versus last month's rent. My parents had indeed shipped my remaining possessions from their home, neatly packed in boxes labeled in my mother's precise handwriting, as if she were sending items to a distant acquaintance. Tyler had kept his word, including family photos my father would have discarded. Childhood pictures from before appearances and achievements became the Mitchell family currency. In one, 5-year-old me sat on my father's shoulders at a baseball game, both of us laughing without self-consciousness. I placed that one on my nightstand, a reminder of what had once been possible. My new financial reality required adjustments beyond housing. I'd created spreadsheets tracking every expense, switched to generic brands, mastered the art of meal prepping, and discovered the strange pride that came with finding $10 wine that tasted like $30 wine. The modern perspective offered solid health insurance that actually exceeded my parents' plan in mental health coverage. A benefit I'd begun utilizing with weekly therapy sessions. Dr. Winters, my therapist, specialized in family estrangement and helped me navigate the complex grief of losing my family while they were still very much alive. "You're mourning the family you wished you had," she explained during one session, while setting boundaries with the family you actually have. Professionally, the months following my decision brought unexpected growth. My pharmaceutical investigation had indeed been nominated for the Burnham Prize. More importantly, it had prompted a multi-state investigation into price fixing and led to policy proposals for transparency in medication pricing. Samuel assigned me to lead a new investigative team focused on economic inequality, a vote of confidence that came with a modest raise that helped offset my reduced circumstances. My team included Jessica Chen and 2 younger reporters who looked at me with a respect I hadn't anticipated. The Henderson piece was why I applied here, one of them told me during our first team meeting. That kind of reporting is what journalism should be. The comment had lodged in my heart, a touchstone I returned to during difficult moments. My relationship with colleagues deepened as I no longer felt the subtle barrier my family connections had created. Previously, I'd declined happy hour invitations, kept personal details vague, and maintained a professional distance that protected me from questions about my privileged background. Now, I found myself joining Friday gatherings at local bars, hosting occasional movie nights in my modest apartment, and developing friendships that felt authentic in ways my country club connections never had. Jessica became a particularly close friend after discovering we shared a love of obscure documentary films and spicy food challenges. "You're different now," she observed over biryani that had us both reaching for water. "More present." "Having your identity surgically removed will do that," I joked. "It's more than that," she insisted. "You're not performing anymore. It's like watching someone finally exhale after holding their breath for years." My relationship with Tyler evolved in unexpected ways as well. After several tentative phone conversations, we established a monthly lunch meeting at a diner halfway between his office and mine, neutral territory where we could rebuild our sibling relationship outside our parents' influence. During our second lunch, he surprised me by saying, "I've started seeing someone new." "What happened with Charlotte?" I asked, confused. The wedding planning had been in full swing last I knew. "I ended things." He stirred his coffee unnecessarily. "After what happened with you?" I started questioning things. Charlotte was Dad's ideal, not mine. I tried to hide my shock. Tyler had always been the compliant one. That must have been difficult. "Dad didn't speak to me for 2 weeks, he admitted. Mom cried about wasted deposits. But Eliza, that's who I'm seeing now, she's a public defender. Brilliant, passionate about her work. Nothing like what they had planned for me." Pride for my brother swelled unexpectedly. "That's brave, Ty. Not compared to what you did." He reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "You showed me it was possible to choose yourself and survive." My parents made occasional contact during those months, always with practical matters as the stated purpose. My mother called about tax documents that had arrived at their address. My father emailed about the final disbursement from my now-closed trust fund, significantly less than the original amount, with no explanation for the difference. Each communication carried the subtext that reconciliation remained possible if only I would reconsider my career choices. I maintained polite boundaries while leaving the door open to genuine relationship. "I'm doing well," I told my mother during one brief call. "My work is meaningful and I'm happy. I hope someday we can respect each other's choices." The approaching holiday season brought fresh challenges. Thanksgiving would be the first major holiday away from family traditions, the formal Mitchell dinner with imported wine and political discussions carefully managed by my father. Instead, Jessica invited me to her family's celebration in Jersey City, a chaotic affair with mismatched chairs pulled up to extended tables, 3 different types of stuffing, none requiring imported truffles, and honest debates where raised voices led to laughter rather than banishment. "You look overwhelmed," Jessica's father observed, finding me taking a moment alone on the back porch. "It's a lot different from my family holidays," I admitted. "Better or worse?" I considered the question seriously. "Different. There's more life here." He nodded as if this made perfect sense. "Samuel told us a little about your situation. It takes courage to choose your own path." "Or stubbornness," I suggested. He laughed. "That too." The best kinds of courage usually involve healthy doses of stubbornness. The week before Christmas, an unexpected email arrived from my mother. Your father and I will be in the city for the Morton's holiday gala. Perhaps we could meet for coffee beforehand? Just to talk. I read the message multiple times, searching for manipulation tactics or ultimatums. Finding none, I replied with a simple acceptance and suggested a cafe near their hotel. The meeting itself proved surprisingly cordial. My mother arrived alone. Your father had a business call that couldn't wait, looking elegant as always in cashmere and pearls. She studied me with barely concealed concern, perhaps expecting visible evidence of my reduced circumstances. You look well, she said finally, sounding slightly disappointed not to find me in tatters. I am well, I confirmed. Busy with work. Happy. She nodded, sipping her latte. The apartment is suitable? It's perfect for my needs, I said, not mentioning the leaky faucet or the neighbor who practiced saxophone at midnight. We circled each other carefully, exchanging surface-level updates while avoiding deeper waters. She mentioned Tyler's unfortunate situation with Charlotte and his concerning new relationship choices without acknowledging any parallel to my own decisions. As she prepared to leave, she hesitated. Your Christmas gifts are being held at the house. I wasn't sure where to send them. You bought me Christmas gifts? I couldn't hide my surprise. Something flickered across her face, hurt, perhaps. Of course we did, Amber. You're still our daughter. The comment lingered with me long after we parted, a reminder that family relationships rarely break cleanly. They fracture along fault lines, leaving jagged edges that can still connect in unexpected ways. Christmas Day itself I spent with Megan and her boyfriend at a ski lodge in Vermont, a last-minute invitation after my original plans for a solo movie marathon seemed too depressing. Surrounded by strangers celebrating together, I experienced both the freedom and loneliness of my new life in sharp relief. Standing outside that evening, watching snow fall silently through pine trees, I realized I was fundamentally changed by these months of independence. The pain of family estrangement remained, but alongside it had grown a profound appreciation for authentic connection, for work aligned with my values, and for the person I was becoming outside the Mitchell family shadow. I thought of something Dr. Winters had said in our last session: finding yourself often requires losing what you thought defined you. The Mitchell name had shaped my identity for 28 years. Now I was discovering who Amber was without it, and finding her more resilient, more principled, and ultimately more whole than I'd imagined possible. 1 year after the fateful family dinner that changed everything, I stood at the podium in a hotel ballroom accepting the Burnham Prize for Investigative Journalism. The audience of media professionals and industry leaders applauded as I clutched the crystal award that represented the highest recognition of my career so far. This investigation wasn't just about pharmaceutical pricing, I said into the microphone, my voice steady despite my racing heart. It was about the human cost of corporate greed, about systems that prioritize profit over people's lives. Most importantly, it was about giving voice to those who weren't being heard. From the podium, I could see Samuel and Jessica at our publications table, beaming with professional pride. Megan sat beside them, having demanded an invitation to witness this historic moment of validation. Even Mark, the environmental lawyer I'd been dating for 6 months, had flown in from a conference in Chicago to surprise me. What I couldn't see, what I hadn't expected, was my brother Tyler standing at the back of the ballroom, attempting to blend into the wallpaper but unable to hide his height or his Mitchell posture. After the ceremony, he approached with a bouquet of tulips, my favorite flower since childhood. "Congratulations, sis," he said, pulling me into a hug. "That was incredible. How did you even get in?" I asked, genuinely curious. "I may have implied I was your plus one." He grinned. "The Mitchell charm still works occasionally." We found a quiet corner away from the networking crowds. Tyler looked different somehow, more relaxed in his own skin despite the formal suit. "Dad knows I'm here," he admitted. He didn't forbid it, which counts as progress in Mitchell terms. "And Mom? She asked me to tell you she saw the ceremony will be in next month's Vanity Fair." She's planning to buy extra copies. He smiled. Baby steps. The mention of our parents no longer carried the immediate sting it once had. The past year had created enough distance for perspective, enough healing for cautious hope. How are things with Eliza? I asked, changing the subject. His face brightened. Actually, that's news. We're engaged. Tyler. That's wonderful. It's small and soon, next month. Very un-Mitchell in every way. He hesitated. I'd really like you to be there. It would mean a lot to both of us. The invitation represented more than a wedding attendance, it was an acknowledgement that our sibling relationship existed independently from our parents' approval. I wouldn't miss it, I promised. Later that week, riding the wave of professional recognition, I received an email that temporarily stopped my breath. The sender, Richard Mitchell. Subject, congratulations. The message was brief, formal, and unmistakably my father. Amber. Tyler informs me of your recent professional achievement. Congratulations. Your mother and I will be in the city next Thursday. If your schedule permits, perhaps we could meet for lunch at the Pierre at 12:30. Dad. No mention of the award's name. No acknowledgement of the investigation that had triggered our estrangement. Just the barest recognition that something noteworthy had occurred. And yet, from my father, this represented significant movement. I showed the email to Dr. Winters during our session. What are you hoping for from this meeting? She asked. I'm not sure, I admitted. Reconciliation seems too ambitious. Acknowledgement, maybe? And what are your boundaries going into this conversation? I'd spent considerable time developing those boundaries over our months of therapy. I won't apologize for my career or my values. I won't accept conditional love or support. I'm open to relationship, but not at the cost of my authenticity. She nodded approvingly. Keep those front of mind. Family patterns have powerful gravity. The Pierre Hotel represented classic Mitchell territory, old money, traditional elegance, impeccable service. I chose my outfit carefully, professional but not corporate, polished but authentic to my personal style. The symbolic middle ground seemed important. My parents waited in the dining room, looking exactly as they had a year ago yet somehow diminished. My father's hair seemed whiter, my mother's smile more brittle. They stood as I approached, my mother stepping forward for her customary air kisses. You look lovely, darling, she said, eyes scanning for evidence of financial struggle and finding none. My father nodded stiffly. Amber. The conversation through appetizers remained carefully superficial. My mother discussed renovations at the country club, my father mentioned market fluctuations, both avoiding any topic that might veer into controversial territory. Finally, over the main course, my father set down his fork with deliberate precision. Your article, he said, the words seemingly difficult to extract, about the pharmaceutical pricing. The congressional hearings that followed. He paused. The outcome has been beneficial to the broader market. Coming from my father, this oblique statement represented the closest thing to approval I could expect. He couldn't acknowledge the human impact or ethical foundations of my work, but he could recognize its economic effects. Thank you, I replied simply. My mother jumped in. We saw your name in the Times last month. And Vanity Fair is doing a feature on your award. The Henderson wives actually mentioned it at Bridge Club. The pride in her voice battled with lingering discomfort. The Mitchell name still has some use after all, I observed with a small smile. My father's expression tightened. About that. Your trust fund situation. Dad, I don't need. Let me finish, Amber. He adjusted his tie. The original terms were perhaps hastily implemented. Your mother and I have discussed restoring certain provisions. I took a careful breath. With what conditions? He looked momentarily startled by the direct question. No explicit conditions. However, we would hope for certain courtesies. Family events. Discretion in topics directly affecting family connections. I can't promise to avoid investigating companies with ties to your associates, I said firmly. That would compromise my journalistic integrity. But perhaps advance notice, my mother suggested. So we're not blindsided at charity functions? I considered this request. I could let you know when a story is about to publish, if it might directly affect your social circle. I won't change the reporting, but I can give you time to prepare. My father nodded, accepting this compromise with surprising grace. Acceptable. The conversation shifted to Tyler's upcoming wedding, a carefully neutral topic that nonetheless revealed the evolving Mitchell family dynamics. My parents had made peace with his choice of bride, allocating a modest budget for a ceremony that bore little resemblance to the society spectacle once planned for Charlotte. Eliza is different, my mother said carefully. But quite intelligent. Her work with legal aid is admirable, in its way. Progress indeed. As we prepared to leave, my father hesitated, then extracted an envelope from his jacket pocket. Your grandfather's watch. The one he left you. I've held it in the safe since, well. It's yours, regardless of other circumstances. The unexpected gesture, returning a family heirloom I'd assumed lost in the estrangement, caught me off guard. The platinum pocket watch had belonged to my grandfather, my father's father, who had encouraged my early writing despite his traditional views. Thank you, I said, genuinely moved. This means a lot. My mother touched my arm lightly. We miss you, Amber. In our way. I miss you too, I admitted. In my way. It wasn't a Hollywood reconciliation with tearful apologies and complete understanding. The Mitchell family didn't operate that way. It was, however, a beginning, an acknowledgement that relationships could evolve without either side abandoning their core values. Walking back to the subway after lunch, I felt lighter somehow. The family I'd grown up with and the family we might become were different entities. The latter would involve more boundaries, more honesty, and likely more conflict. But it also offered the possibility of greater authenticity. That evening, I met Mark for dinner at our favorite neighborhood restaurant, a far cry from the Pierre's formality but infinitely more comfortable. The owner, Elena, greeted me by name and led us to our table by the window. You seem contemplative, Mark observed as we shared appetizers. How was the Mitchell summit? Surprisingly productive, I replied. Not warm and fuzzy, but respectful. That's Mitchell for loving, right? He teased gently. Getting there, maybe. I smiled. They're trying, in their way. I'm trying too. Later that night, back in my apartment. No longer new but now unmistakably home, I placed my grandfather's watch beside the Burnham Award on my modest bookshelf. The juxtaposition struck me as oddly fitting, symbols of my family heritage and my professional identity no longer in opposition but coexisting in the life I'd built. The past year had taught me lessons I never expected to learn at 28. That integrity often comes with a price tag. That independence means both freedom and responsibility. That family, both the one you're born into and the one you choose, requires ongoing negotiation of boundaries and expectations. Most importantly, I'd learned that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. By standing firm in my values and identity, I'd not only preserved my professional integrity but paradoxically opened the door to more authentic relationships, including with my family. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been nights of doubt, moments of lonely panic about financial security, occasions when the temptation to conform to my parents' expectations felt overwhelming. But with each challenge overcome, each article published, each genuine connection formed, the path I'd chosen validated itself. Looking out my window at the Queens streetscape below, so different from the manicured Connecticut views of my childhood, I felt a profound sense of peace. My life was unquestionably mine now, shaped by my choices, aligned with my values, and rich in ways the Mitchell definition of success never accounted for. I picked up my phone and sent a message to the group chat I'd formed with Jessica, Megan, and other close friends. Family lunch survived. Treaty negotiations successful. Celebrating with wine and takeout at my place this weekend? The responses flooded in immediately, offers to bring dessert, jokes about diplomatic immunity, expressions of pride for my boundary setting. This was the family I'd built around me, the community that supported not just my success but my authentic self. The journey wasn't over. Family healing rarely follows a linear path, and the Mitchell legacy would always be part of me in complicated ways. But I'd found my footing on a road of my own making, a path that honored both where I came from and who I chose to become. So, what about you? Have you ever had to choose between family expectations and your authentic self? What did you learn from making that difficult choice? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of finding personal strength through life's toughest choices. Remember, choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's often the most courageous act of self-love you can make. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the clarity and courage to follow your own authentic path.